Good afternoon. For today's lecture, I'm going to talk a bit about the five bloods, and I will also be covering our final assignment for the class, which I shared with you in an email yesterday. So if you haven't already, check for that email. I explained the assignment a bit there, and I'll explain it a bit more here in today's lecture. So, to start, the five bloods. Um, this is a movie that people more or less seem to be pretty divided on as far as whether they like it or not. It's interesting because if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score for this movie is 90%. So the critics love this movie. But if you look at the audience score is 60%. And that reflects more or less the reactions I've seen from you guys in your written reviews and recaps of the film is that some of you really liked it. Some of you liked some things and didn't like others. And then some of you just thought it was okay. And I think that's interesting because, again, that reflects more or less the audience score of the movie. So, why the critics love it? It's creative. It's creative. Movie critics love movies that are creative and thought provoking, which this movie definitely is both. Spike Lee just has a very creative vision for all of his films. Some of the camera angles and nuances to his film, the little details he sprinkles in, just make him stand apart from any other movie director. And that's something I've always appreciated about his films is that they're just so creative, they're so thought provoking, and he just has some interesting little touches and details that he sprinkles into all of his movies. For example, there's always a scene in all of Spike Lee's movies where he has like a still shot of a character where they seem to be still, but everything else behind them is moving or like moving forward and backward. And I always love those little creative touches in his films because they give them a very like surreal quality. And you can definitely feel the surrealism in the Five Bloods, whether it's the characters flashing back to their Vietnam experience, Paul in particular. Just some very surreal elements to the movie, things that, again, I think critics are very excited for and review very well. So I think that's why critics love this movie. And if you haven't seen any of Spike Lee's movies prior to this one, they're always filled with social commentary. So this movie is no exception. He uses the civil rights movement as a backdrop for the Vietnam War, as these two things are happening at the same time. And so I think, I'm not surprised that Spike Lee did that. We have a lot of references to individuals, to moments that are occurring during the civil rights movement and Vietnam War that he sprinkles in throughout the movie as well. And I just like the way he does it with like real actual footage spliced in between the action of the movie. For me, his movies are just, again, very visually appealing for me, at least in my opinion, very creative, and I've always appreciated that about his films. So, something that stood out to me about this one was the music. And I don't know if you guys noticed this or not. I'm a huge fan of music, especially soul music of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. I just love that era for music, probably because my mom used to play a lot of that music when I was a kid growing up, and she loved Motown. My mom loves Motown, and so I grew up with Motown in the house. I'm a huge Motown fan, and Marvin Gaye is just one of my all-time favorite artists. And so the movie begins with Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, and it ends with Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, and that's sprinkled all throughout the film. And so as I'm watching this, and I've seen this movie a few times now, and the first couple times I think I just thought, oh well, Spike Lee just loves Motown, and it's a great song, so it just fits with the movie. But in preparing for this video lecture, I did a little research on what's going on, and it's interesting what I found, which I more or less knew, but I don't think was just very conscious of until I read the Wikipedia entry for what's going on. So I'm just going to read a little bit of it. This is the Wikipedia entry. for Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. What's Going On is a concept album with most of its songs segging into the next and has been categorized as a song cycle. The album ends with a reprise of the album's opening theme. The narrative established by the songs is told from the point of view of a Vietnam veteran returning to his home country to witness hatred, suffering, and injustice. Gaye's introspective lyrics explore themes of drug abuse, poverty, and the Vietnam War. He has also been credited with promoting awareness of ecological issues before the public outcry over them had become prominent. The album was an immediate commercial and critical success, eventually being regarded as a classic of 1970s soul. And not just a classic of 1970s soul, but a classic album of all time. Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? If you pride yourself on being a music buff like me and you don't know What's Going On is one of the greatest albums of all time, then you need to visit that album. It is seriously across the board, not just my opinion. Any music critic that reviews music over the years in the United States, all of them regard What's Going On as a classic, as one of the best albums of all time. So I didn't know that What's Going On was specifically this concept album of a Vietnam veteran returning home to see what's going on around him in the United States. And so that just kind of really blew me away because I knew that album and the songs from it came out in the 70s, obviously at roughly the same time, but I didn't know Marvin Gaye had that specific angle for the album. So that's really interesting. Um, I think that a big takeaway for me, while we're on the topic of music, is just the healing power that music has. And this album definitely has a healing quality to it. It's very positive. It's very much an album that promotes peace and love. And it's no surprise that this came out at the time that it did and was more or less a response to the Vietnam War. Another song that came out in 1971 at the same time is the Beatles' Imagine, John Lennon's Imagine. And if you haven't heard that song, which I'm sure you have, you obviously know that's another song that promotes peace and love in response to the war and the civil unrest and the civil rights movement that was going on at that time in the United States. So, um, music, obviously, at this moment in time, has a very powerful healing quality for people. If you think about the music of the 70s, it kind of coincides with the hippie movement, which seems only natural as we're coming out of, again, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, where people have just had it up to here as far as war and violence and civil unrest and civil justice is concerned. And so it's no surprise that that hippie movement followed that time period, and the music definitely really reflects that again those themes of love, of peace, of brotherhood, of coming together as a people and moving past all of our differences and all of the violence that has resulted from those differences. So again, Spike Lee, he sprinkles Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, all throughout the movie. I think it's so well done. The musical choices that he uses and the moments that he uses them in the film, it just works really well in my opinion, and just makes again this movie stand out from a lot of other war films. And then as I was getting ready for this lecture, I was going to talk a lot about the plot of the movie, and so I wanted to make sure I had the characters' names straight. And so as I was going over the characters' names, we have Paul, excuse me, Melvin, Eddie, and Otis. And it's interesting because as I was going over those names, it just hit me like, wait a minute, those are the first names of famous Motown musical artists. And then as I was looking up those names, it hit me. Those are the names, the first names of the members of the Temptations, the Motown group during the 60s and 70s. And even the son of Paul, David, at one point in the movie, the French girl who he has a love interest in, love interest in asks him about his name, and he says, "Oh, I'm named David after David Ruffin of the Temptations." So David Ruffin was the fifth member of the Temptations, who was like the most talented singer in the group, and just took the Temptations to a whole nother level. So those are the names of our main characters in the movie, or the names of the members of the Temptations, all five members, including David Ruffin. So just a little details about the movie again that just make it more interesting to me. And I love movies and directors that do that, that kind of leave like little Easter eggs for you to find. Or I like movies that make you think, about the symbolical meaning of certain things and details within that movie. So, um, again, music was a huge part of this film. And I think the reason for that, again, is during and after the Vietnam War, you have a lot of artists making songs and artwork that is in response to the Vietnam War and the civil rights movement, obviously going on at the same time, which is the backdrop for this film. And Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" is like the perfect song that goes with this film. So just a little bit of insight for you, extra details about the movie that maybe you didn't know about, or maybe you weren't aware of. So another big takeaway for me from this movie was the performance of Paul, the performance of um, I had his name here, but then I lost it. The actor's name. Um, anyway, the actor that plays Paul in the movie, it just does an amazing job of a veteran who's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and he just plays that role so well. He was amazing in that movie, and in fact, all the actors were really great in The Five Bloods. Something that I just enjoyed about the film that's on the lighter side is just the banter between the Five Bloods and the way they talk trash to each other. It was just very funny for me, like moments of levity throughout this heavy film, like their banter amongst each other. I just found to be very entertaining, and I love all of those actors, and in particular, the actor that played Paul in this film just killed it. Just did an outstanding job. And I really like the scenes at the end of the film where like he's speaking directly to the camera. That's definitely another like Spike Lee detail that he has in a lot of movies, is where there's this moment in the film where one of the actors is speaking like directly to you, the viewer of the film. And I just love the acting in this movie, and I think that's a highlight for the film as well. So, The Five Bloods, I won't go on anymore about like the plot and the story of the film. We all know what it was about, but I just thought it was, again, overall a very creative film. The way it was directed, the little details sprinkled throughout the film, for me at least, were appealing. And I could see why critics really love this film, and I can also see why, some viewers were turned off from it. Whether it was the social commentary or whatever it may be, some of the messages that were promoted in the film, I could see how maybe that was a turnoff for some viewers. But again, that's Spike Lee, and that's the way he's going to direct films. And I'm just my big appeal to for me for his films is just the creativity, the thought-provoking nature of the films, and just the little attention to detail that you don't see in other movies like that. Okay, so moving on to our final writing assignment, I'm just going to cover that briefly here. So I gave you four options. And again, we have a week and a half to write this paper. I don't want you to stress out over this. I want this hopefully to at least be somewhat enjoyable. I know it is still a final and you have to do it, but I hope there's at least something about each of the options that appeals to you. The first option is a research paper. In particular, I highlighted PTSD because I thought PTSD was a common theme in the book, the movies, and Tim O'Brien's virtual talk. A lot of Tim O'Brien's virtual talk I felt like was related and connected to PTSD. And you could tell Tim O'Brien, is dealing with some PTSD after all these years. So, again, back to his talk, right? He mentioned how a war never ends. Oh, yeah, that was something else about the Five Bloods. Is more than once in that movie, a character mentions how the war never ends for people, and people are still affected by it all these years later. In fact, there's moments in the film where some of the Vietnamese people that the Five Bloods encounter are still, they have hard feelings about the war, and they're blaming them for killing or harming their family members back when they were carrying out their duties during the war. So you have that theme with individuals about the war never ending, and that being related to PTSD for many individuals, that um, even after the war ends, it's never over for them as individuals. They'll be affected by it for the rest of their lives. So, option number one, you can write a short research paper. It doesn't even have to be an argumentative research paper, just a short research paper on a war-related topic. I think PTSD would make for a great, topic to do further research on, as again, it was a huge theme of the movies, the book, and Tim O'Brien's talk. Option number two is a creative writing assignment. I think, again, back to what I said in the previous video lectures, I think you all did really well with the creative writing assignment. So I want to give you a creative writing assignment option for our final, and that is to interview a friend or family member that's served in the military, who has actually, been on tours overseas or wherever it may have been, and to interview an individual to try to get them to share a war story with you, or a story related to their military service at all. It doesn't necessarily have to be a war story. I think that would make for a really interesting assignment, and obviously it would be directly related to our focus for this second part of the semester. So I also mentioned a couple of you in this class are either current or ex-military, and you have served. So I'd be interested to hear some of your military-related stories, um, whether they're war stories or not. If you feel like you have a story or a memory or an incident that again relates to our focus for class with the films and the book, I would love to hear that story, and it would give you an opportunity to share some of your own personal experience in this assignment as it relates to war in the military. Options number three and four are pretty obvious as they connect to what we've been doing leading up to this point. Option number three is you can continue with the film study if you've been enjoying that, and that would be to watch two more of the list of 5 films, so a total of four. And then you would do an in-depth analysis on whichever film you were most interested in. So that's an option. And then option number four would be to do more of a literary analysis on one or more of the chapters from the things they carried that we read. So those last two options, we've already done a lot of the work that would be related to writing those two papers. So that could be an option that's maybe more reasonable if you feel like you don't have time necessarily to do research or to interview somebody. Um, you can definitely consider options three and four, as we've already worked with some of the films, we've already worked with some of the chapters in the book, and so then you would be able to just do a more in-depth analysis than the homework assignments and the writing assignments that we've done that connected with the films and book. So again, I know this is a stressful time. I know some of you have been specifically affected by COVID recently, your families have, or you have personally. So um, I know it's tough right now to focus and to find time. So I don't want this to be an assignment that stresses you out. I hope that you at least enjoy this assignment somewhat, and you find an option that best suits your writing skills, that will allow you to write a strong paper. As far as sources for your paper, I'm only requiring that you have three. You don't even have to have scholarly sources. They can be popular sources. And then all I'm looking for is just a short paragraph annotation for each of those sources on your works cited page. Well, if you're giving an annotation, technically it would be an annotated bibliography, but just a short annotation, just a short paragraph summarizing and then reflecting on how that source relates to your paper or how it's relevant to your paper. So those are your four options. If you have any questions, you want to run any ideas by me, you're not sure if what you're writing about fits what I'm looking for, don't hesitate to email me and ask me for help. I'm happy to look over your writing even prior to you submitting your final paper. Again, your final paper will be due by the end of finals week, by the end of next week, Friday, not Sunday, because I have to have grades in by the end of Monday. So I'll give you until the end of next week, until the end of next Friday to submit your paper. And if you have any questions as you're working on this assignment, you want me to look over your writing prior to you submitting the final draft, please don't hesitate to ask me for help. I'll be available for the next week and a half. So please email me with any questions or if you need further assistance. Again, I know this semester hasn't been easy for all of us, but I have enjoyed teaching this class. I've enjoyed reading your writing assignments as they've gone with the different sections of class, and I look forward to reading your final papers. It's been a pleasure working with you this semester, and I wish you the best of luck with finals.